Thank you. Yeah, when Robert pulled up our chart, of course you get very nervous. You're like, oh my God, what's he going to say? And it reminds me in high school, every year, one student from each grade would do their public speech in front of the school. I did my speech on the craziest dreams I'd ever had. And the girl 1 year older than me did hers on interpretation of dreams. And during that 10-minute speech of hers, there was no paler, sweatier, and more nervous 15-year-old boy on the planet. So here I am, CEO of Fireweed Metals, no less pale, but not nervous at all, and I'll explain why. So obligatory cautionary statements, trust nobody, definitely not me. So I'm going to launch with capital structure because this changed actually pretty substantially in December, and really what happened there was after years of discussion, the Lundin family came in and invested $20 million in the company. And alongside them, another $15 million of cash came in. So this took us to a $40 million roughly cash position total, and tees us up for, by far our biggest year ever. So we're pretty excited about what's coming here. It's a massive endorsement. Nobody in this industry bats 1,000. It doesn't happen, but if you follow the track record of the Lundin family, they're pretty savvy. They're pretty good at recognizing big projects. They're pretty good at understanding risk, and understanding the size of that family trust. They've obviously been pretty successful. And we have 3 projects, and I'm going to focus on 2, although I am going to touch on the third at the end. All are in the north of Canada. Our Mac Pass project, which is a large zinc lead silver project entirely within Yukon. The Mac Tung project, which is a tungsten project immediately adjacent to that actually crosses the border from Yukon into Northwest Territories. And our Gaina River project is kind of a new exploration thesis we're working on that's within the NWT. Essentially the north in many places is a tough place to operate due to a lack of infrastructure. We benefit from a road to the project, so we're able to bring in heavy equipment, trucks and trailers. And we also benefit from, in 2020, my shining moment of glory that year, the federal government and the Yukon government announced $71 million of funding for our access roads, right as the world was collapsing due to COVID. So we did not perhaps get the market recognition that we sought when that happened, but that is an important consideration. So first on our zinc project, this is a project that we bought the core of it, which is kind of that dotted line box in the corner there, Tom and Jason, from Hud Bay. We put out a resource in 2018 that was pretty massive, and this was something that at the time represented one of the world's largest undeveloped zinc resources. But I want to kind of touch that we've been doing 5 years of drilling since then. We've got intersections at Tom, like 14% zinc over 14 meters. At Jason, 7% zinc, 5% lead, 120 grams silver over 14 meters. 4.5% zinc, 4.5% zinc, 70% lead. Lots of silver over 8 meters, and it just goes on and on. 24% zinc and 3% lead over 10 meters. 4.4% zinc over 200 meters, 8% zinc over 100 meters. And what do all these intersections have in common, including this last one, 25% zinc over 5 meters or 6 meters. And the big coup de grace last year, the best greenfield zinc hole in about the last 10 years, 12.3% zinc over 124 meters. What do all these intersections have in common? None of them are in that 2018 resource. So 7 of the 10 best intersections on this project sit outside the 2018 resource. When you think about the scale of opportunity here and what the next resource might look like, we're looking to be in pretty rare air in terms of undeveloped zinc resources here. So that thesis we had that there's more here than just Tom and Jason, and the Tom and Jason themselves weren't done is pretty evident now, and we continue to push this forward. And really, the thrust of our exploration has been towards what we call the boundary zone there, and a nice shot of that right along the Hess Fault, which is a critical fluid conduit there. We see the main and west zones. And that intersection that we put out in November, such an amazing intersection, that the core of that 66 meters at over 17% zinc, pretty amazing intersection. We've demonstrated such massive scale there, totally new discovery at boundary zone. We're really excited about what's shaping up there, and I think that's really dragging the center of gravity of the project west. And after all that exciting drilling that's happened since the 2018 resource, we still have an abundance of totally untested exploration targets. Even with all the capital we have now, it's tough to just simply find time to dedicate to properly planning if we really wanted to test all these targets. So we're in an exciting position where this is the sort of project that you might launch with a 20-year mine life, but produce for 100 years. And our Tung project, no less impressive in the context of tungsten markets. Part of the reason we bought that was not because we specifically targeted tungsten, although it is an extremely interesting metal for a variety of reasons, but it's actually because it was immediately adjacent to our Mac Pass project. That came out of North American Tungsten in their bankruptcy in 2015, ended up with the government, and we convinced them to sell it to us. And, tungsten, not super unique, but in a small group of metals that is absolutely dominated by China. But 85% of the world's supply comes from China. So that's both a challenge and an opportunity. It's a challenge because they can manipulate the market, as they did in a way that put North American Tungsten out of business. But it's an opportunity that suddenly the Western governments are serious about critical minerals. Suddenly we're seeing precedent for governments issuing price floors to producers to make sure that they're insulated. We're seeing incentives for production like we've never seen before. So we're pretty excited about the opportunity to develop this. And when you look at the sort of body of tungsten projects in the world, you've got grade on the bottom there. You contain metal on the top. Pretty common distribution that you get higher grade, it tends to be smaller. And as you're lower grade, you can get a bit bigger. Well, that's Tung. It is a massive, as I've described, freakish outlier in the tungsten world. So that historic resource estimate, which we'll be updating soon, and we expect to improve a little bit, a pretty staggering amount of tungsten, so large that you become your own worst enemy. Like you have to throttle production to avoid flooding the market. So, we're looking at something that could produce 5 to 8% of the world tungsten demand for 50 to 80 years. So lastly, our Gaina River project, and this is something, I think people who have been around the industry for a while might be familiar with the work that Rio Tinto did there in the 70s, and then Eagle Plains, who's presenting here, owned it for a while. Really, we were driven to take another look at it because there was an academic paper published in 2018 that compared the Kipushi mine, if you know Kipushi and DRC, owned by Ivanhoe, that's about 12 million tons at 34% zinc. They noted that there's only 2 places in the world that you get Neoproterozoic reefs like the kind that are critical to the formation of the Kipushi deposit, and that is at Kipushi, and that's at Gaina River. So interestingly, if you look at these reef front deposits like a Kipushi, well, there is only Kipushi of that style. They'll be vertical, and if it's not been folded or turned over, it would still be vertical to this day. And the mineralization, or I should say the strata there at Gaina River, still pretty flat. So the way that Rio Tinto approached their 28,000 meters of drilling in the 70s, first off, they were drilling back reef. They were not looking for the reef front. Second, they were doing entirely vertical holes, which when you consider the sort of, cross-section or footprint of a deposit from a vertical perspective, would have been extraordinarily stroke of luck for them to hit this deposit, if such a thing exists. Now, we don't know that a Kipushi exists there. It would be a tremendous find to find one, and statistically it probably doesn't, but we felt it was worth staking, acquiring, and take a run at it. And, we had a pretty good go up there this year, some very, very high-grade samples, which you can see a news release for on our website, or certainly talk to me about here. Some very intriguing gravity anomalies suggesting potential massive sulfide bodies, and confirmation and extension of historical soil anomalies. So what does this all mean? Why Fireweed? Why critical metals? I think it's not just that governments are taking critical metals seriously, it's that industry is. We see a lot of industry, particularly around tungsten and zinc, extremely nervous about being reliant on geopolitical, maybe not adversaries, but perhaps not best friends, for their metal supply. Certainly on the zinc front, a massive stimulus coming out of COVID means a tremendous amount of infrastructure, which is one of the, if not the dominant use of zinc. We have pretty strong endorsement. Brian, obviously his cousins, the Lundin family, maybe not, coming in, Teck having him put in a bunch of money too over the years, and holding just under 10%. And a year that, 2022, that actually says 2022, we actually have only released 2 out of 32 holes from last year. So we see quite a few holes coming in the coming weeks. And we're going to have a drill program so large this year that it will actually likely be larger than every year prior. So big things, and happy to talk more about it. Thank you very much.